Hi, it's June, almost July, and we're just ahead of the blooming season for all the hydrangeas. There's so many, and sometimes it can get a little confusing. So before they're all in full bloom out in the landscape, I thought I'd answer some of the questions and tell you a little bit about some of the most common varieties ahead of time. I'm Scott from GARDENWORKS. Let's get right into this hydrangea thing. Probably the most recognizable hydrangea are the Mophead Hydrangeas or the Hydrangea macrophyllas. There's a lot of different cultivars of Mophead Hydrangeas. I mean, literally hundreds of cultivars of Mophead Hydrangeas, and the differences are things like some are dwarf, some are very, very large, some have the ability to bloom on very young wood or new growth. Those are like the endless summer hydrangea, if you've heard of that one. And that's the reason that those are really useful is for climates, unlike ours, that have a cold winter. The plant might didact to the ground, and then you would never get blooms on a hydrangea that blooms from second year wood. So we don't have to worry about that too much. We have a lot of hydrangeas that are just fantastic, really great size, big flower heads. There's shades shades of pink, and there's shades of blue, and shades of white, really. Lots of different shades. Biggest question we get about hydrangeas is, can I change the color? I hear I can change the color by fertilizing them or, talking to them nicely at night or something like that. And you can on some. So Mophead hydrangeas are the ones, the hydrangea macrophyllus. The color can change between shades of pink to shades of blue or purple. And it's based mainly on the acidity of the soil and the ability of aluminum to be available for the plant. So if you have an acid soil, they'll be blue or purple. If you have a basic soil or a neutral soil, they're going to go more towards the pink shades. You can get an acid soil by giving them a sprinkling of aluminum sulfate. Is a great way to do that. Or garden sulfur will make them acidic. Lime around them will make the soil less acidic and maybe result in a pink one. You'll notice in the lower mainland of BC, they naturally tend towards the blue side because we have a naturally acidic soil. So that's the stuff about Hydrangea macrophylla. Only one more point. Here's a white one. A white one doesn't have the pigment at all. That's why it's white. Can't change the color. It's going to be white. So you can lime to your heart's content or put lots of aluminum sulfate in. You won't change the color. And people do love the white ones. I think this one is Sister Teresa. There's a number of white ones in the macrophyllas you can choose from. Well, now for something completely different, as they said in Monty Python, I'm pretty sure. That's the oak leaf hydrangea. So oak leaf hydrangeas might be the first one to really get going in the summer and start setting up their bloom. Oak leaf hydrangeas are an absolute shade lover. They are very popular with landscape design because they're a really, really resilient plant. They'll do very, very well. They're not as needy for water as what the Mophead hydrangeas are, but they don't have quite the same showy bloom. They do have an oak-shaped leaf, very, very much like an oak tree, and then they have these big, long panicles that have the flowers. And the little trivia bit that we didn't talk about yet was that the showiest part of the hydrangea flower is actually a bract. It's not a flower. The flower is a little bit in the middle. And on these, there's a lot of flower and not as many bracts. There's many cultivars of these too. There's one called Peter's Honey that has a golden foliage. And there's one called Snowflake that's got a double flower, so it looks very much like a snowflake, each of the individual flowers. So super useful shrub, great in the shade, great in mixed ones with things like hostas. Absolutely one of my favorites. Truly, the oak leaf hydrangea is my favorite, but it's probably one of the least well known. So let's go on to something that's a bit better known, and that's the PeeGee hydrangeas. Here's one. This is a variety called Quickfire. There's a lot of varieties of PeeGee hydrangeas, especially considering they don't have the range of colors of, say, the Mophead hydrangeas. So the Paniculata grandiflora hydrangea, that's what the PeeGee stands for. And what it's referring to is the very large cone of white, creamy flowers that these develop. And they're covered in them. Really interesting fact is that there are many different varieties that as they age through the summer, you'll notice them going sort of a buff pink color. And some of them will do that more quickly than others, and some will do it more vividly than others. So the breeders have selected for that and got lots of varieties that, you know, they almost start out that way, not quite. And one of the really well-known ones that was hot was a variety called Strawberry Sundae. Quickfire is well known because it's actually one that blooms earlier in the season. And some of these are quite dwarf. They'll only grow 3 or 4 feet high. There's a variety called Little Lime, and it's got a greeny cream color instead of the white color. And then there's one called Little Lamb. There's one called Bombshell, which is incredible because it only grows 2 or 3 feet high, and it's absolutely covered in blooms. But then there's the varieties like that are really big, that we grow them in shaped almost as a little tree, as a tree that's up 6 or 7 feet high. Those are spectacular and what people notice when they're driving through neighborhoods in the middle of August. All right, so that's Paniculata grandiflora hydrangeas. When we were talking about macrophylla hydrangeas, or the big leaf hydrangeas, you probably thought, I don't know why he's not talking about the lace cap ones, because, you know, those are a different kind, and you should be talking about those, and so I am going to talk about them, but they tend to be cultivars of Hydrangea serrata, I guess, and that's what we call mountain hydrangea. I think not all mountain hydrangeas have lace cap flowers, but it seems like the lace caps are all serrata varieties or mountain hydrangeas. So this is Hydrangea serrata preziosa, and this variety doesn't have the lace cap flowers. It's got a really nice darkish colored stem and quite lovely flowers. Really quite vigorous though. That's, if you want one that's going to grow big, the mountain hydrangeas are the one to choose. 6, 7, 8 feet high easily. That's lovely. And then I've got an example here of more of the lace cap ones. So this is also a Hydrangea serrata variety, but it's a cultivar that's been picked really. This is a great variety. This is one of the proven winter varieties you probably see in the pot, called Aha, Tough Stuff Aha, and it's got quite lovely. Each individual bract and around the outside is double and ruffled. It's really beautiful. If I had space, one of these would be in my garden in a flash. And you'll see in the middle is the smaller bits that are the actual flowers, I think. So they end up doing a ring, and they call it a lace cap. It's not as evident on this one as it does on some of them, where it's a big ring and it's more developed than this. This is still early in the season. So you get those, and you treat them pretty much the same way you would treat a big leaf hydrangea, though. They are very similar in their needs. A little more resilient to not getting enough water. I think hydrangea, hydra means water. It also is a Greek guy who I think kind of was a water guy. And they don't like to dry out in the summer. They grow great in shade. They'll grow in some sun. But if they grow in some sun, you want to make sure they're getting enough water. Sometimes in talking about hydrangeas, climbing hydrangea will creep its way into the conversation. People will be surprised, and they imagine a vine growing up an arbor with big ball mop flowers in blue or pink, but that's not the case. There is a climbing hydrangea, but the flowers on it are small. They don't have the bracts surrounding it that are the really showy part, but they get a lot of flowers, and they look great when they're just even before the flowers open. The buds are very white, and they get covered in it. I used to live close to Burnaby General Hospital, and they had a climbing hydrangea that covered a 25-foot long, easily 40-foot wall that was on the north side. That's one of the things that climbing hydrangeas love, is they love the shade. People are always looking for a vine for shade, so that's a fabulous choice. A little bit different. All right, well, there are other hydrangeas, of course, as well. I haven't covered them all. Probably the only other one which we didn't have an example of here, and it's not as popular on the West Coast as it is in, say, in Ontario, where they're all over the place, and that's the Annabelle hydrangeas. Varieties like Invincible are Annabelle hydrangeas, and that's Hydrangea arborescens. Arborescens kind of says tree to me. They're taller. They get a big white flower head on them, but they're smaller bits. And what happens with them in our climate when it rains is it knocks them down, and I think that's one of the reasons they're not as popular. What they are great about, though, is that they're super cold hardy, so in eastern parts of the country they will survive the winter no problem. So I didn't show you that, but you'd be calling me out on how come we didn't talk about those, so I thought I'd better talk about them a little bit. And I wanted to finish off, just let you know, just how wonderful hydrangeas are as a cut flower. They're very long lasting, and so I actually have that here. This it looks like a pot of hydrangeas, but it's actually cut flower hydrangeas that I've cut and put in a super simple arrangement. And the really cool thing about hydrangeas as cut flowers is you don't need a lot. You don't have to have, I mean, I've got 3, and that's taking up all the space I'm going to have on the buffet at home where I'm going to put this. So keep that in mind. As the season goes on, flowers on a lot of hydrangeas, if they're allowed to, they gently start to dry to a buff color. They're fabulous as cut flowers then too, and that's almost getting into fall. And you can dry them, which is a whole other story that involves glycerin and things like that, and or hanging them upside down in the garage. So that's for another day. If you've made it to the end of the video, I absolutely salute you. Well done for hanging in there. We do have a YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you do that, it's fun. You get more of this stuff and some pretty useful stuff from a bunch of other folks at GARDENWORKS too. Thanks for watching. Take care.